So it has to be.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Evagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World weekly collective energy share. Pulling us up on the phone in case we have anybody there to comment. World. Oh, look, I should probably turn off my sound. What I'm doing now. Okay. So last week we had quite a response to our discussion about not being, like getting past being a victimhood, the victimhood and being an empath and all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting because we've had a bunch of discussions, and then from that we got to what? We got to the heart of hearts, getting to the heart of hearts and being able to really discern what it is we truly are here to be.
Right.
Without the influence of the ego, right?
Right. You know, and when I was looking at that right before we got on, I was looking at like a puppet, how, you know, it's living as a full being here, or a puppet that the ego pulls the strings.
Yes. Right. Well, and what if we started looking at, so this is what sort of came into me in meditation this morning. I'm like, like, I'm like, oh, this is bigger than a bread box. Just in time, right?
As always.
As always. So we have been talking about, God, isn't that funny to think we had the share on Friday night? It feels like it was like a month ago because I was like, it's your Friday night, what? We were talking about like allowing ourselves to remember that whole pure being and all that kind of stuff. So the funny thing is this morning, I'm just like, oh, and even last night, right, when I went to go post this, I was like, I don't know, like, I'm not quite getting the words or what it is, and it didn't quite feel right. Like, even though we had our talk on Thursday and it all fits, because we were talking about a bunch of stuff, which, you know, I think is important for us to get to today too. But what came to me that I thought was really interesting is that ego thing, right? And the thing that was like, has been, it's been a little bit grumbly, like, so it's not really annoying or distracting, but it's just under the surface grumbly this weekend. That's what I've noticed.
Grumbly's good weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't like it like made me cranky or anything like that. I actually had a really nice weekend, but there was just something a little bit grumbly under the surface. Right. And so when I went into meditation this morning, I was like, so what? And then I'm like, well, maybe I'm just going to focus on what I've been focusing on and getting out of my own way in all ways, you know, being able to, you know, I'm free to embody, you know, my divine destiny, like all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And so when I was out there, I was just sort of like, okay, good morning, Yasmin. So something I have noticed, and it's really an interesting thing that is fascinating. And then I sort of saw it come around in this meditation. Is, you know, I've noticed as much as many of us talk about how the talk has become so much more common in terms of saying, I am God, I am the divine, like I are the same, we're all one, blah, 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 blah. So then you have like this going on in this talk, right? And then in the next breath, somebody posts something about how the Arcturians are upgrading us, and the Pleiadians are like, you know, doing this to us, and da-da-da. And I'm like, so that just totally doesn't jive.
I know. Exactly.
But then that's the same thing, and that goes back to this, very similar to like what we were talking about last week with the empath stuff, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, so let me look at that, because here's the thing. I have seen out there, as well as myself in my own stuff, a lot of Lemurian stuff coming up lately, a lot of Atlantean stuff coming up lately, a lot of ancient Egypt stuff coming up lately. And then I start seeing these things, they all have been starting to connect, but I'm going, I don't understand the connection, because then I see the Lyrans, and then I see, you know, other star beings. And then, like, I remember several weeks ago, I told you in a meditation I was out there, and it was almost like we were in some other star system, and it was like we were doing the Matrix, and we had the sort of the equivalent of the thing plugged into our heads, and we create, you know, and we're creating this,
right,
and you know, in doing that we forget, right?
right.
And then I was just like, oh, look at that. And then I got, oh, well, that's all another externalization of the ego, right? It's still ego of,
It's
you
just
know,
an evolved form.
exactly. It's like, oh, gotcha. I got
Right.
you right there.
Right.
And these stories become like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, and it's like, oh, yes, we're all one and we're all divine, whatever. But, you know, the Arcturians have to come and give us these upgrades, right?
Right.
Or the Pleiadians or Lyrians. And there's nothing wrong with that, except it still makes us a victim.
Exactly. And the power's external to us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's really a personification of our own ego at some level, but we don't recognize it and we forget, right?
Right.
But what if we go back to, oh, okay, so maybe the Pleiadians are, the Arcturians are, but what if we're the ones that are the Arcturians that are over there doing what this is? Because this is all just the experiment that we're creating through our consciousness, right?
Right. Right. Which, you know, that reminds me, we talked about, like I mentioned Friday and I guess Thursday when we talked about, you know, so many people experience that imposter syndrome, feeling like I'm impersonating something or whatever. Well, that's yet again, actually we're impersonating, funny person, people, humans.
Yes, that was great. That ties into this too, right?
Right. Right.
Because if at some level we know we're the ones, the Arcturians, the Pleiadians, whatever, or wherever, right? You want whatever you want to call it, the Blu-ray beings, there's 5 bajillion different names for different things, right? The Ascended Masters, the angels, the guardian angels, right? So then as we then recognize that, right, then do we feel more like we're being an imposter as a human because we thought we had to be one or the other, right?
Right. Right. Well, and the ego tells us that's right.
Right. Because that's that separation identity, right?
Exactly.
Because every time I say I am something, we have to say I'm not something else, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so
pure duality.
Yes. And so the ego now is going, okay, oh, you uncovered this over here. All right, well, so we'll accept this, but then I'm going to sneak this in over here, right?
Right. Like so many feel, and I know I've been there, like, well, if I have this money, that means I had to take it from someone else.
Well, yeah, that's a belief that many have, right?
Right. Well, but think about it. If I have this power, I had to take it from someone else or take it from somewhere else. There has to be an equal and opposite give and take.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah. Well, and it's sort of like the other thing, the Lemurian stuff, the Atlantean stuff, like all these different things that are coming up for different people, right? And then it's so funny because then I just see, oh, and you get thousands and thousands of people that follow these things because they're like, oh yeah, more stuff on the star beings because they're far more interesting than me, right?
Well, and it lets me count on something else to take care of something for myself.
Right. Instead of changing it within me. Right.
Right.
And so then I'm like, okay, so is us looking to Lemuria and Atlantis, is that a version of us talking about the good old days?
Right.
Is that a version of us saying, oh, well, you know, that was such a nice time. Let's bring that back. Right?
Walk down memory lane.
Well, that's really what it is, right? Because I say, oh, well, you know, the timeline, the Lemuria, and you know, I still am very pretty clear that this entire experiment was really called Lemuria, right? This whole thing, the whole Earth thing, is just another name for it, right? But we just go to like the beginning stages, or what we would call the Garden of Eden, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it's so.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What if the Garden of Eden was Earth?
Well, that's how I've seen it.
Right. I mean, of course.
When I was taken, when I had a friend of mine go, who was a hypnotherapist, take me back because I was trying to really prevent myself from remembering that whole beginning of Lemuria. The first time when I did that, that's really what it was like. And when you talk about the whole thing is, of course, because we were freely creating, we were still connected and yet creating individual things and still staying connected through the whole thing. And then as we progressed, because that was part of what we wanted to do, like we then would take steps of more separation. And that's what felt painful, right? So the fall from grace, because then we forgot, oh, by the way, I did that. We did that.
Right. Right.
Right. And remember all the stuff you've had over the years of, oh, I created separation, I've done this. And it becomes very personal. Like, and it's like, wow, well, of course you did it as Sarah, but like, of course we did as the one consciousness, right?
Exactly. Right.
And it's like, well, then why throw blame on you?
And the closer you get back in touch with that oneness and seeing the power and remembering you still have that element of humanity in there of like, oh, I unleashed this on the world, so I must be a bad person.
Well, there's the ego, right? The judgment.
Right. Which judgment, right? Yes. And expectation that all these things that are happening are not what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, right. Or it's out of our control, or there's some group of beings, some, council of 12 out there who's controlling the whole thing, and going back to the feeling of being a puppet, right?
Right. Right. An empathic puppet.
Yes. And the victimhood of, yeah. And so, but yet we don't play it as victimhood. We say, oh, but let the Arcturians do it because they're so evolved. They must know.
Right.
Except we're them.
Right. Right.
And it's like, okay, it's like saying, and here's the thing. So like going to the whole Lemurian, Atlantean, Egypt, whatever, the timelines, right? It goes back to the whole thing of like this. Okay, like some people had a great time in high school, right? So high school or college, like just pick something. Now, and you could relive the glory days and talk about the glory days and how things were so awesome then and so innocent and pure and powerful and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
But in reality, do you really want to bring that front and center again today after all the evolution you've done since then?
Right. Right.
Like it's a good idea. Like we think it's a good idea, but then it's never what, like, there's been so many movies about that. Like it's not what you think it is,
Right. Right. It was a good thought in theory.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, we are on the upswing is the word that comes from me. Like the push to shift to this next thing. Right. And to do that, right, is truly to put to rest that there is anything outside of us, that there is like, and that there's anything that's outstanding from the past that needs to be rehashed, right?
I almost look at it as it's the effort to master humanity is to come to this place of fully understanding what it is and allowing it to be what it is at the same time to be what you are.
Right. And that goes back to then what you and I were talking about last week that we haven't talked about yet, which is that idea of being on house arrest.
Right.
Having that little the anklet on your ankle going, you can only go so far. You can only like allow yourself this much. And it's not given to us by anybody else but ourselves. Right. And so then, there was the perception of seeing that like, not only did I feel that way, but that's a collective thing and that's a humanity thing. And that's what we feel like when we put this part of our consciousness in these physical bodies. Right.
Right.
And we say, okay, putting myself on house arrest for this many years on the earth plane, this many cycles around the sun.
Right. And even if it's not like house arrest, it's body arrest.
Yeah.
I'm going to limit myself in this physical
body. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's the body being the house. Right. The physicality, because then it's like, oh, but then I have to, and what we had seen last week was the fish, like the fish bag, right? Like when when you get a fish at the fish store and they put it in a bag and then they like catch it down at the top to get some air inside the bag, and they rubber band it so that the oxygen can stay in there by the time, getting it to the house in the tank. Like you're capturing this part of, you're capturing the air, right?
Right.
So it's like, that's what our physical bodies do, the physiology of catching a piece of our consciousness into
right.
this.
It's like a snapshot.
Yeah. Yeah. And so really it is just a little snapshot. And so, the question that we've been having, right, last week was, well, what do we do with that?
Right.
Yeah. A, acknowledge that that's what we did. And B, acknowledge that that's our choice, not something that's out of our control. Right.
Which I think is huge.
Yeah.
Is to just come to that understanding that this is a choice, which resets that mind frame to, oh, if it's a choice, then I can choose what it looks like. I can choose how it interacts. I can make choices. I can make choices about what my fish bag looks like.
Exactly. And how big it is, and how, and what color is it?
What's in it with me.
Exactly.
And the experiences I have in my fish bag.
Yes. Essentially, yes. But when we do that, it takes us out of the fish bag as much as if it allows us to be in the fish bag, right?
Exactly. Which I think that's what makes it so important.
Right.
It's that melding of so within, so without.
Yes. In like really the sense that we've been looking to get to.
Right.
Because then when we look at it as, all right, I'm the person holding the fish bag as well as the fish and the air and everything inside the bag, right?
Right.
Then we realize, yes, I am a human and I'm the Arcturians that are doing the thing in the Council of 12 who are doing the thing to help the humans and but that's us doing that to our fish bags.
Right. I love it.
It is as simple as it can get. And and I said, we're so attached. In my meditation, I was like, yeah, we're so attached to the story because I love this. We love these creations, right? And part of what I was seeing with that is, well, it's no different than, all the awesome shows that we create. Now look at how things are being made at this like tremendous speed, right? Like look at how, and the vast amount of, now that we have Netflix and Hulu and, all these different things and, stations have their own channels and right? And we have all of these shows that would have never been like in front of us before. We have like all these shows that are really cool and they might not have made it before are there for us to see this within ourselves.
Right. Well, and the messages are getting so sophisticated that it almost slips into the subconscious.
Yes.
And allows that expansion to happen at that level to where all of a sudden you go, really? I didn't realize that.
Right. And it took all those things like running in the background, all those considerations and things that we put on the shelves, and all the shelves finally fall off and it all comes together and you're like, look at that. Right. So yeah. And it's sort of like what I was seeing this morning, I think ties more the bigger picture, that ties it in a way that was important for us to see, because I still see that polarity, going on of, oh yes, of course we're the divine and we're infinite and everything else. But, the Arcturians who are not us are controlling us and doing this for us out of the, out of the love of their hearts.
Right.
It's like, oh, but they're more, even though I'm everything, they're more. How does that work?
Exactly.
And so, it's funny that and it goes back to how I have felt since very close to the beginning of this stuff, like in the interactions I had with those beings, those faces of the divine that I've seen, right? Whether they were archangels or angels or, ascended masters or star beings, there was no difference. I actually felt such a camaraderie with all of them, like they were my brothers and sisters. And then, that we're together in this, that it's not a you versus me or you're telling me, it's a let's consult. And at some point I realized, oh wait, this is just different parts of me
coming back together.
Right. But it's so important for us to get to that place to say, to not be like, oh, and it's not to not be reverent about those facets of the divine, but it's only being as reverent, I think that's the right word I'm using, to them as you are to yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's and I think that that's where so many people fall short
Yeah.
in that, you can only love externally as much as you love internally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I know. I saw somebody post something this week is like, if only everybody loved everybody else the way they love themselves. And I was just like, and I wrote under that.
that's a problem.
I said, that's the problem is they do.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it was like, if only everybody loved everyone else the way they love themselves. And if only I can't remember what the second part of it was, but it was all related. And I actually put in a comment underneath and I said, well, actually the problem is most people don't love them. Well, a vast majority of people don't love themselves, which is why they treat people the way they do.
Right.
Because when you do love yourself, you have nothing but love to share.
Right.
And that's something it's like in the spiritual world, you still can't see, like many just don't seem to get that. And they perpetuate the idea of loving yourself as being selfish and exclusive and egocentric instead of saying, no. The point is loving myself, because when I love myself, I can't do anything but love you.
Right. It just happens.
Yeah.
It's almost like a cause and effect. It's just a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
It's not anything that has to be focused on or thought about. That's just the natural repercussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think today's thing is really about that ability to see all that, right? To not only just see it, really get it, like remember it here,
Right. There's a difference between knowing here and
Yeah.
knowing in your heart.
Yeah. And saying, you know what? Yes, and that goes for not just the star beings and all that other stuff, right? It also goes for the tools that we talk about, that we externalize and give our power away to, right?
Absolutely.
And this is the point. This is the turning point. This is the turning point of saying, I recognize that this is a beautiful tool. And I also recognize that it's me that created that tool, that is that tool, that is that
Right.
representation, just as much as this.
Me speaking to me.
As this fish bag.
Right.
That's our new term. We'll call everybody fish bags. Hey, fish bag.
Right. Right.
Oh, I can see my kids looking at me now. So yeah, but that's the whole thing. I mean, it's no different.
Right.
It's no different than saying, okay, this pen is a tool and the Arcturians are me. It's like, and the pen is me, and what's written is me. And it's just.
Right. It's like picking up a pen and saying, okay, tell me what to write.
Yeah.
Pen.
Yeah. So the pen is writing itself, right?
Right.
But we laugh at that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's that feels really good. It actually really feels giggly because it feels really like, oh my God, there's the thing. Cause we were saying last week, what is it that's right under our nose that we're not seeing? It's like that we're like feeling like we're playing the hot cold game, right? And we're you're steaming hot, you're boiling, you're on fire.
You're on fire, right? We are on fire.
Yeah, we are. And I think this is the next step. Although, and like I said, I know we've talked about this before, but this is really sort of what most of there is to do now is to continually call out the ego.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. It's because the ego keeps on saying, okay, well, I'll let this part go, but I'm going to do this. Right.
Right. And it's not even so much, it's just that awareness.
Yes.
Which then you can turn into observation.
Right.
Yeah. Until you become aware of where it keeps creeping back in, you'll stay where you are.
Yeah. Or you'll only go to that certain point, right? That's right. The house arrest.
The house arrest. The fish bag.
The fish bag. You'll never get out of your fish bag and into the bigger tank. I'm just saying.
That's right. Right.
Oh, the visuals are great.
Right.
So, yeah, so there's something to do with that. But I think for us, it's really to set ourselves to be able to commit ourselves to not just seeing it, but knowing it and remembering it and allowing it. And every time, like, because it's funny because like I said, there are many people I know who are like they're so embracing of the idea of like we're all one, we're all divine,
Right.
and it's like, oh well, I was channeling
Right.
these beings,
Right.
or I'm channeling this, or and
And
I'm just like.
and if you think about it, if they changed the way they said it and added the word in but before they added the next piece, it would be so much more obvious.
Yeah.
But they don't.
Or they just said things like, I channeled, like it's like changing our communication, right? To something like, I channeled the consciousness of us that is this.
Right. That identifies itself as.
That identifies itself as.
Right. Right.
And that changes the energy of the whole
Where
thing.
I spoke to the part of myself that's Arcturian.
Yeah.
Right. Wow, that feels actually really good.
Yeah, it does. It's like, oh, well, here's my Arcturian self. Here's my Lyran self. This is what my archangel self is saying today, Like, what if we just change that wording right there? That starts to take it all back.
Right. I mean, and what just occurred to me is I spoke to the part of me that's the sun.
Uh-huh.
I mean, talk about expansion and just that.
All right. Yeah, that feels really good.
Yeah, that feels really good. I like that one.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, yeah, I can just feel, I don't even have words because I can just sort of feel all these different things. And that's the empath. That's truly it.
Right.
Is recognizing, like, that's the evolved empath. Is the true recognition of that is me.
And that truly is the authentic self.
And the authentic self, right? And it's not saying I'm taking on being a tree, right?
Exactly.
Like there's all these trees out there. It's like, oh, that's me.
Right.
And when I connect in connecting with trees, and that's part of why I love big trees because they have such a great solid presence, right? It's like, well, that's me reminding me how to do that.
Of all these things, all this remembrance. Wow.
Yeah. And then It's like, okay, so, but I'm not a tree. I'm not making myself a tree. I'm still in my fish bag of Angela. Right. Oh my God, this is going to be the joke of the day.
Right.
but versus the fish bag of the day.
I heart my fish bag. I think this is a release.
I know it is. Oh, much better release, right? Oh, I love these kind. Anyway. All right. So, and it goes back to that discussion with the empath thing. It's like, right. Well, I'm not taking on the tree stuff, right? I can see it and feel it and honor it as the identity is created. I want to say fish bag, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Saying, okay, and I honor that, even though it's all me bringing myself up into all these different things and different projections. But that's the difference, right? We talked last week about not taking it on and like not feeling like we have to take it on because there's some kind of like obligation. It's like the tree is fully the tree.
Right.
And the tree's journey is fully its journey. And that is why it's split into like, or we have split into those personifications, right?
Right.
Or individualizations. And so the tree is complete, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of if it burns down, if it does this, if it does that. Now, I might be guided to help if my guidance says it might be a good idea to do this, not doing it out of that evaluation of making me a good person. But,
exactly. Yeah.
But should I do okay, this would be a good idea to do this, like, or do that, just do this, because there's something in the bigger picture that all interrelates. And the tree doesn't blame me if I don't like pick a fungus off of its bark.
Right.
Doesn't make me a bad person. If we ran around to, oh my God, I still have tears coming out of my eyes. But that's the whole thing. And so when we come to that realization of it's all like all of it, because I'm just as much the tree.
Right.
So, it's this idea. And oh my God, I was thinking, because we're in that place of coming into spring, we're getting ready to do our spring planting. And so it's like, what if we did that with all the plants? Like, I so honor you with love and wholeness as me,
right.
as this embodiment of me. Like, oh my gosh, you wonder how the interaction between the plants and people would change dramatically, and how the growth patterns would go and things like that. Right. It's the Dr. Emoto stuff, the hidden messages in water, the effects that we have in sharing love.
Right.
Separation energies. So now that we solved all the world's problems in a complete tiny little fish bag, no more bread bombs. Throw that out. So it's whatever it is for us to get to be able to call ourselves out on it in a loving way, right? To turn the mirror back around and say, okay, I see it this way, and I also recognize it's still me.
Right.
In another fish bag.
Right.
But it's still me. And that makes this whole, so like I said, it goes back to, I don't know, we talked about this sometime a couple of weeks ago, goes back to the, those pictures, like, I love these, the big pictures where they take all little pictures to make a bigger picture.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what that's called.
But I think those are so cool because it's such a perfect picture of what each of the facets of this representation of this set of dimensions is. This fish bag of earth, right? Because that's really what we did. And when we look at it and say, okay, maybe we are in Arcturus with these things attached to us, creating the projection of this particular set of dimensions, right?
Right.
But then what if then there's somebody in the Blu-ray dimension creating the Arcturus, which is us too?
Right.
And then there's another one, it's that whole concentricity of the multiverse.
Right. Back to the Locker and Men in Black.
Yes, the Locker universe. And it doesn't make one bigger, or the Marvel, right? That had the universe in the Marvel too.
Right.
And then it's
I always love that line that says, bigger doesn't mean bigger.
Right.
Isn't about size.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's that whole acceptance of all of that, right? To be fluid to all of that, to remember that, because then it changes our entire way of being as us, and it's like, even just talking about this brings on this huge sense of peace and freedom.
Right. Right.
So then it's like, okay, I can choose to, and yes, it's important, I think, now to change our verbiage to say, me as this, me as the Council of 12, me as this, or us as the Council of 12, or us as the Arcturians, or us as Archangel Michael, or us as, as God.
Right. Right. That really, I mean, even something as simpler as me as my husband.
Right.
Me as my child.
Right.
Me as my dog.
Because it goes back to, we talk about this in Trinity class, and I know I used to talk about this occasionally. It would come up. We were talking about how, like, time is a construction, right, of the mind and separation.
Right.
And so there is no time. So in effect, like, we could be living out all of our lives at the same time and creating different, stories to go along with it. Right. So you, as Sarah, could be me is me in another life, and I'm you in another life. Like, here we are facing each other.
Right.
And that sort of goes, make people go, like, it makes you, like, sort of like, But when we take out the time beliefs around that, because yeah, the more we look into stuff, like, I've been just going into the depth of like quantum physics like lately to see how it compares to what we see and understand. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's right there. Like quantum physics shows it that there's no time and space, and that
Right.
like it is the, like when we talk about like the speed of light and all that kind of stuff, it is our perception and our experience within these bodies, but that does not mean it's true.
Right. Right.
It also doesn't mean it's the only way we can measure.
Right. Right.
And we don't, like, so we don't have to measure in a linearity of the speed of light. We can measure as matter. We can measure as waves, and that's what the whole intention experiments is about. Like we can measure however we choose, because we are the creators. And like there's a moment of like that realization of going, that's so overwhelming, because that gives me
Right.
like total freedom, right?
Right. It's overwhelmingly simple.
Yes, and overwhelmingly powerful at the same time.
Right. Well, and the power comes in the simplicity of it.
Yes, which is what we say about Trinity, because that's really what it's taking you to help you realize within yourself, right?
Right.
Not to put a plug in for that, but
Why not?
why not? But anyway, okay, so let's go out there and be all the fish bags in the universe
Right. Right.
and
Full
realize,
understanding of the fish bagdom.
yes, and to see all, to accept, not just see it, but to accept and know it. And as much as we transcend it, we allow ourselves the wholeness within it, right? There is that whole connection. That feels really good too. Ooh.
Right.
And everything
Right.
else that we talked about.
Yeah. It's allowing that full understanding.
Yep.
Oh, that feels marvelous.
Yummy. Very
Yummy.
yummy.
Very yummy.
All right, let's go and do that. You ready?
All right. Yep.
That was really nice.
No,
I think you say that every week, but it always is.
it was funny. At some point, me as my dog got up and decided to scratch and shake and jump in the chair. And I was laughing to myself, thinking, rather than being irritated with him, I was like, oh, I guess I just needed to be more comfortable.
Yeah, that's all good. I know. I started seeing that with everything. It's like, oh, me is my cat,
Right,
me is my kids, me is my
right,
husband, me is the plants. That and it's like, well, me is my bank account. Me is yeah, all kinds of things. It was like, oh, and how seamless and easy and effortless and
right,
like, oh, of course. And not only, and me as my fairy godmother, right? Me as like all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, look at that. And I could just like wave my magic wand and there it is. I'm done. And we knew that, but it's so funny. Just like, this just takes it to a different level altogether. It's just
right.
in a fun way. For some reason, it feels really fun and like a game.
It does. It's like finding a door in your house you didn't know you had.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I've been looking for this.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, so everyone, this week, yeah, look at where you're still doing that. Look at where you're still externalizing and
Practice being me as.
yeah, practice being me as and not so that's the thing is like going back to what we were talking about with the empathic stuff, right? Don't take on the stuff for them, right?
Right,
But remember that it's like me as that, and and it's for me to honor me,
right,
right? To complete that journey. And all I can do is love me for being me and all the facets of that, right?
right,
And see how that changes your interactions with everything,
right,
you know?
right.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah C. Gavagnoni.
signing off on this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.